my crafty friends, I'm going to create card number 14 in my full deck challenge. This one has a very vintagey feel with a very textured background and a beautiful vintage picture on the top as the focal point. To start off with, I'm going to add a thin piece of white tissue paper with some Mod Podge to the face of the card. I find this helps to adhere any color or any kind of texture or medium that I'm going to add to the card later. If you don't have tissue paper, you can use the inside part of a napkin, or you could skip this step and apply a layer of clear gesso to prime the surface so that the color and any medium can stick. When I trim the edges for the corner sections, I do tend to just sort of tear them a little bit and not make them too neat, and I'll show you later on what effect this gives, how it makes the corners a little bit more effective. You could also do this on the edges if you don't want neat edges and add additional texture. I'm going to be using oxide inks for this part of the project. This is a Tim Holtz oxide ink in a spray, and the color is called Tea Dye. I just put some drops onto my acrylic block and I spray some water, and then I smoosh the card onto the top of the acrylic, or you could put the acrylic block onto the card and just allow it to let the colors move around. As you can see, it creates a beautiful pattern. I dry each layer before I add the next color. The next one is an ink pad in the color Vintage Photo, and I do it the same. Always have a spray bottle with water handy, as it helps to water down some areas and to allow the paints or inks or whatever you're using to flow easier. I use it in almost every project. I'm now adding some grit paste. This is also a Tim Holtz product, and it's like a texture paste, but it's a lot more grainy, and I do love using it for my vintage effect, as when you put the inks over it, it gives it like a worn, rusty kind of look. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to show that on the video, but I'll try to show you a close-up later, but it gives it a beautiful texture that makes it look really worn and old, like true vintage. Once the grit paste is totally dry, I'm adding more layers of the ink. I'm just putting drops directly onto the card, spraying some water and letting the color move around. Drying again between each layer of color. The ink reacts differently to the grit paste as it does to the background, so you get different tones and colors depending on where the ink is landing. Gives it a beautiful variety and a lot of interest. I'm now going to add some stamping. I'm using an acrylic stamp that's a vintage script with just black ink, and I've decided just to do it long ways, not the normal way you would read from left to right. I've done it long ways just to make it a little bit different. The little vintage girl that I'm using is from the Tim Holtz collection, and I like them because they are of quite thick cardstock, so you don't have to put them onto any kind of backing. They're ready to use, and there's quite a big assortment. I wanted to have little wings, and I've just got those that I've printed out previously for another project, and I'm just going to layer her onto some strips of paper just to make it like an embellishment cluster to give it a little bit of depth. I don't want to just stick her directly onto the background. I think she'll be a little bit lost. Because she's the focal point, I want to sort of enhance her and make her pop off the page. I just try different elements in different positions until I find something that I'm happy with and that I think works and is balanced. I'm using hot glue to adhere everything to the card. I don't want everything flat, so I'm curling up the edges a little bit so it looks rough and used and worn. Just push them up with your finger. I thought to try and make that sticker, which is like a bus ticket, a bit vintagey. So I crumpled it up and then used the vintage photo ink to try and enhance where the creases were. But it didn't look great when I finished it, so I decided not to use it. I went just with a plain sticker as per the original design. I went to stick the wings and then I realized that they're a little bit too monotone. I wanted to add a little bit of color, so I removed the glue and I added some color to them just to make them pop a little bit. I decided to go with pink and I'm using an acrylic paint for this, just very watered down. I want the color very, very subtle. Once it's dry, I'm going to add it to the back of the figure. I'm just cutting it in half so I can put the wings a little bit further apart so they show better. I'll glue the wings first onto the figure and then I'll glue the figure onto the background. I want her to stand out a little bit more off the page, so I'm going to use a double-sided foam tape. I'm going to add some additional contrast using this watercolor pencil. I dip the point into some water. I go around the edges and then I use my finger to smudge it a bit so it's not too bold, but it does create a nice frame around the card, which makes the center then pop out more. A really nice contrast, I think. Let me show you close up the background and how effective it is. You can see the graininess of the grit paste and how the colors change. There's the corner where I told you earlier where I tear it, and you can see it's made a lovely dark edge around where the tear is, which really makes it interesting and something a little different. It's not a monotone or plain flat background. I punch a hole so I can add it to the rest of my deck. I hope you're following along with my full deck challenge. If you're not, it's never too late to start. I will put a link below to all the other videos for the other cards that I have made. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little notification bell. I'll see you again soon. Bye.